Alrighty, so it's time to kick off. I'd like to welcome everybody on behalf of SABSA to the second in the Perspectives webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about success in the low-touch economy. I think quite a good topic. My name is John. I'll be your MC. I'm just here to kind of glue it all together, but I'm not going to waste too much time with any formalities. Today is a very narrow and specific subject, I think highly relevant to where a lot of people's heads are at the moment. So that's good. And I hope we can get through the formality stuff and get straight to our speaker, who has got a fantastic CV and has done amazing work on this very topic. So it should be good. I'm looking forward to quite a robust discussion. We'll try and get through everything so that we can get to Q&A and keep this as interactive as possible, as quickly as we can. So I'm going to try and keep timing to give our guest speaker, Nick, as much time as we can and give you some time at the end. Also remember, if you've got questions or anything to add or reflect on or ask, put it in the chat if you can, and then we'll get to that or the Q&A. And I will make sure that we cover as many of those as we can in the time that we have. So without much further ado, I thought it'd be good to formally open this, somebody who's qualified to open this webinar, the Dean and Director of Henley Business School Africa, and also the co-chair at SABSA, Professor John Foster Pedley.
Thank you, and I feel I'm on a very tight time whip here, so I shall try not to talk so fast to get so much in. But thank you very much, John, for that introduction, and welcome to everybody who are joining now. I see people are coming in all the time. Why is this important? It's really important because we've been facing COVID for 5 or 6 months now, and it's not going to go away for another year or two probably. And we're going to be living under a different economy and different conditions. So all the businesses, all the organizations, everybody is going to be living in what we might call low-touch economy or distance economy. How do we do that? We can busk it, or we can jump around, or we can get excited, or we can be methodical, clear, intellectually clear, and process-wise organized. And Nick DeMay from Board of Innovation has been inspiring me and many other people with his colleague Philippe. They live there in Antwerp. They're a wonderful international organization working with great companies. They've been able to articulate how to do this, both operationally and in terms of business models, in terms of strategy, better than anyone else I know. We're very privileged that Nick's being able to join us. And we are going to be listening very carefully. And I'd like to hand over now to the chair of SABSA, the South African Business Schools Organization, Professor Randall Jonas, who is, I know, even more inspired to help business schools and businesses around the country and around Africa to manage under these circumstances. So over to you, Randall.
Many thanks, John, for those charming words, and thank you very much, John Vlismas, for introducing us to this very, very important webinar today. This is the second in the series for SABSA, and we really aim to share information and expertise with a range of our stakeholders because we feel it's so important, particularly in today's world, the pandemic world, that has been touched by so many problems in the world of employment and economies that are suffering as a result of it. So the low-touch economy and the success behaviors is quite a pertinent and a very, very topical matter for us to discuss. And we've brought Nick, with the collaboration of SABSA and Henley Business School, to talk to us today how businesses can rebound and recover in a low-touch economy. What are those success behaviors that will make them survive the pandemic? And that also what will it entail to recalibrate actually their business models for the so-called new normal. So SABSA really aims, therefore, to improve its recognition as an organization representing business schools, but more importantly, to be that catalyst for very important dialogue and discussion around problems that we are facing in society, and particularly in business, and how we can share top-class thought leadership, such as the ones that will be brought by Nick DeMay today, to our audiences. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over now to John Vlismas. Thank you very much, John. And we're looking forward to an exciting discussion today. All the best, Nick. Thank you.
John, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. It's the new plague, right? At Henley, we have a running joke. You're on mute is our new mantra. It's the space bar. It doesn't behave the way it should. But before we bring Nick on, just quickly, for those who are hearing of Nick for the first time, or the Board of Innovation for the first time, I think it's really important to note that when you do look at the material being produced by the Board of Innovation, what strikes you immediately is how crisp and how absolutely applicable the information is almost immediately. There's so many of these webinars at the moment telling people what to do in this time, but so few of them get to the point so quickly. So it's really great to have you in. And I did notice in our rehearsal, Nick, that that's how you like to operate, very fast, only the useful information, and we move forward. So without much further ado, over to Nick DeMay. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Great, thanks for your introduction. Let me already share my screen so people can follow along. So 1 second. So like this, so that should work. Yes, great. I think we're all set and ready to go. So yes, I'll take some time here to explain the low-touch economy and the full story. Also want to make sure you will get all the slides. So we'll get a full export of all the material that I will share in this presentation. So there's no need to take a screenshot of every single slide. There might be a lot of information in here. So at the end, I'll make sure everybody will get the full content. And I'll assume also you might get access to the full recording as well. So indeed, like the Board of Innovation, I'm one of the founders of the Board of Innovation. We're a strategy and business design firm, mainly focused on helping large multinationals and big corporates with their biggest innovation challenges. We have offices today in New York, Amsterdam, Antwerp, and Singapore. So we have this very ambitious mission always to share what we create, share tools. So we want to inspire 100 million people to innovate for a better tomorrow. So participating in these type of webinars definitely fits with our long-term mission to share all this material. So in this story, I'll explain, I give a quick introduction in what we define as the low-touch economy and why we believe this will be here to stay for a relative long time. I'll talk about winners in the low-touch economy, so what makes certain companies a little bit more successful, a couple of examples on how you can go forward. And briefly at the end, I'll talk about a couple of opportunities or white spaces as a couple of recommendations of what you can do with your business or organization to go forward in the next era. Second here. Yes. And at the end, hopefully there will be some time for Q&A. So if you have specific questions, you can already drop them in chat, or at the end of the conversation, we can have a discussion on that as well. So talking about the feedback loop of the low-touch economy. So when we talk about the low-touch economy, of course, it starts with all the different health measures and the restrictions that were put on us due to the pandemic itself. But our main focus has always been on the challenges that are happening on the economy side. So there's a lot of economic disruption ongoing. There's also a feedback loop in terms of behavior shifts. So consumers are behaving differently, people are behaving differently in society. So the way consumers and companies are interacting with each other is a little bit disrupted at this moment, and we don't think that that will return anytime soon. So depending on how people behave, this will of course also influence how the pandemic will play out. So there's this interesting feedback loop between those three areas. We try to monitor what's going on already for a couple of months now, and to define that new economy, we coined the term low-touch economy because it will be an economy defined by a lot of changes in how we interact with companies and business. I think we all experience that in our day-to-day lives now. We see a lot of new disinfecting stations. We see new type of vehicles. We see cities that are being redesigned with new bike lanes to give more space to people. Robots appearing in hotels or in hospitality contexts. We even saw robots patrolling in Singapore to patrol for social distancing. We see virtual weddings, a new type of informal, new social gatherings where there's a hybrid solution between digital and offline interaction. So basically a lot of experiments are ongoing. Some are just here to stay for a relative short time during the strict lockdowns. Other things are here to stay for a longer time. Definitely when it's in the context of larger events, larger gatherings. So you see, depending on the region where you're based, things are going up and down. I'm based in Antwerp, Central Europe, in Belgium. We are talking about our second wave. If we go to Hong Kong, they're talking about the third wave already. And if you look at the US, they're still more or less waiting in this very long, extended first wave. So you will see, we'll all see that depending on the region, the pandemic plays out differently, and also how businesses and companies respond to those different measures. So it's not just a one-size-fits-all solution. Depending on the region or the context, you'll have to behave differently or adapt your strategy in a different way. So the number one question we get at the moment is, okay, when will this be over? And most of the time linked, okay, will the vaccine matter in the end? Of course, that will also, if I look back maybe a couple of months ago, early April, early May, I was a little bit more positive about the influence about having a vaccine available. I think we changed our position a little bit in the last few months now. You see that at least there are so many vaccines ongoing in production. So you see AstraZeneca and more companies are in their third trial phases already, meaning they might go to market relatively soon compared to other vaccine developments. Russia was already pushing forward and trying to distribute coronavirus already from next month on. But at the same time, you see rising tensions around people that are opposing against going against the vaccine. So they're not trying, like you see in the US or in Brittany, in England, where you see at least almost 50% of people are not willing to easily to get that vaccine. So there's more resistance. There's a lot of mistrust in government. So you also see it will not be an easy solution. So even if the vaccine will be available and if you get it distributed, it will not be a quick fix for our society and the economy. So I'm a little bit more reluctant to see this as a quick win here. It will be a step in the right direction, but it will not be as easy as I expected maybe to be in the last few months. So unfortunately, many of the ripple effects, so it's not just the pandemic itself, but the impact on our society, the impact on the overall economy, that will be here to stay for a longer time. So even if we have the solution available for the pandemic, there will be so much disruption in the economy and how people behave, or people adapted in a different way. So that we will feel for a longer time. Maybe a question to you already. So you all should have access to chat. So if you go to the chat, if you can quickly answer. So in your region, what do you think for which industry might be last to fully recover? So it really depends on the context or region or the domain you're in. But if you look around, which industry you think will take a very long time to recover now? If you reply in chat, make sure to select all panelists and attendees, otherwise you're only answering to me. So try to answer it, make checkbox. I see a couple of people are replying only to me. So the checkbox, all panelists and attendees, then you're replying to everyone who's following. So I see people here, of course, tourism, hospitality. You see that governments are pushing really hard to restart tourism. Many regions are impacted a lot. You see regions like Japan were even bidding to pay tourists to get back to Japan. Education, very, very good point. Education, we have a lot of debate about that because depending on the age, like younger kids, luckily the virus is not as impactful or negative impactful for those kids. So most of the time education for younger kids is recovering quite soon or very quickly. But older education, for older generations like 20-year-olds or even talent development in large corporates, that's now moving fully to hybrid solutions. So indeed, it will take a relatively long time to see a full recovery there. Other good examples, indeed, like fashion and many parts of retail might be disrupted as well for a longer time. Feel free to share more of those replies in chat already. So overall, we'll expect a slow and bumpy recovery. Based on our feedback, we did different surveys, like this is based on a feedback survey from 750 people in multiple organizations and multiple industries. Already for 2020, only 15% of those companies expect to see a positive return this year. So there are, of course, some companies that are doing quite well, even in these difficult times, but other companies are severely hit. Luckily, many of we already assume that many companies will find a solution and will get back to a more positive result next year. This doesn't mean that it will be fully recovered, but companies are adapting, are switching to new products and services. But it's a very asymmetrical outcome. So that some companies will stay at this very low, impactful, negative feedback loops. Other companies might find a solution or might even thrive and have exceptional profit margins. So it's a very strange situation now, where you see that some companies are doing quite well and other companies are impacted for a relative long time, indeed, like tourism, hospitality, and maybe some education companies. A recent survey consulted CEOs of large companies to see, okay, when do you think you will see a full recovery in your organization? And this, you see that the timing evolves. Like if we ask similar questions, looked at results early on in March, April, then many people were still hoping that by summer we'll see a full recovery, or at least we get a better view on relative soon recovery. But once we hit it summer or close to summer, most organizations realize, okay, this is here for a relative long time. This is not a quick fix. So you see that in those polls as well. Like already many CEOs look at almost 60% looks at the full recovery for 2022, so Q1 2022, and only 30% almost 1 year later, 2023. And this, of course, is just across many different industries. There might be industries like tourism and hospitality, might even take a longer time to go to full pre-pandemic levels. So it helps also to look at different regions globally, because every region has a different culture, a different way to approach the pandemic, and different way to help in the recovery of the economy. If you look at overall the numbers of the Chinese economy, where of course the pandemic started, you see that luckily in many of the parts of that region, the many pointers in the overall economy are already back at pre-pandemic levels. So that's interesting to see. Like this, but it's very asymmetrical. So you see that it's back at pre-pandemic levels, but it's not as expected. If you look at the numbers last year, 2019, we're not back at that level, but at least back at the economic status of early January. But China and certain Asian regions have a very different approach on how to handle the pandemic, also culturally, like wearing masks or following certain guidelines, or doing far more invasive tracking and tracing. Many of those measures that might help with the pandemic are not, there's not a good fit with many cultures in other parts of the world. So many regions will have a slower recovery due to that. And of course, the economy, the different situation in each region might be different. So China is not always the best context to compare, but it's interesting to see that all across the board in many points are showing that we're already back at pre-pandemic levels here. But again, it's unevenly. If you look at numbers for tourism on the left here, different regions, you see that many touristic spots are still very low. The numbers on the right here showing how retail is recovering. Very gradually, retail is recovering in different countries. There are many of those charts available. So I added a source at the bottom here. Financial Times is doing a great job today to keep track of multiple regions and different industries. So there are good websites here to track what's going on. And depending on the region that you're in, or depending on the industry, it helps to look at the different companies. I need to try to slow down a little bit. Sorry. Sometimes I'm a little bit too enthusiastic. Thanks for sharing that in chat. So what's also interesting to follow is that in terms of recovery, we were talking about the V-shaped recovery, L-type of recovery. The fact is that certain areas of our industry are recovering quite well. So certain industries are having a better fit, let's say, with the digital economy, or people like us, where we can restart or continue doing what we do just remotely via video conferencing and all those tools. But many of us, it might give a different view on reality, because many people, they are working in hospitals, in retail, in factories. It's quite difficult to get back at pre-pandemic levels. You can't just switch to digital solutions. So we have a lot of conversations with companies like insurance companies and so on, and that we're debating about new strategies. But of course, we're biased because many of us are working in a situation that we can use modern tools to restart. So you see that there's a great article in the Wall Street Journal recently showing that certain parts of the economy are actually rising again. But unfortunately, there's a big rise in inequality. The biggest impact can be felt by minority groups, and we're often working in other parts of industries that are affected more by the pandemic. So unfortunately, there will be some sort of K-shaped recovery. And I can follow that way of thinking, where certain companies are doing well, but then certain people in that community will have a very tough time to recover and might take years for them to get back. So let's have a closer look at some of the winners and companies that are doing better. So we always try to see how can you adapt to that new environment. So if you want to become part of that group of winners, what defines those winners and what can you learn from those organizations? So we try to keep track of winners. So again, you will get a slide deck, but there's a public sort of a dashboard now that where we keep track of companies that are doing better. So meaning they have positive returns, they're adapted to this new normal already, and they're thriving even in this era. So there are multiple categories that you can define, and we excluded one big category. There's a big category that's doing really well at the moment. All companies that are linked to life sciences, pharma companies, of course, they're doing better. They're selling masks, they're selling maybe vaccines or treatments already. So they're in a great position and overall they're doing well, but we excluded them from the list. If you look at other companies that are doing well, we see multiple categories emerging. There's a big category what you could link up to digital infrastructure. So companies that are helping with automation or communication, so those things. On the right here, there's a category, anything into low-touch living. And that's interesting to follow here. So there are companies that are providing solutions for companies to restart. So they're offering facility management services with new gates and procedures to enter buildings, but also safer living at home. E-commerce solutions also fits to that lifestyle, like what's a low-touch lifestyle, and companies that can help out here. Maybe a third one that I want to highlight. The bottom left here, there's a category which we would cluster investing in yourself. So people, even in the pandemic, during the lockdowns or when they feel locked at home, they can't travel, but they still want to invest in themselves. So meaning they might invest in a healthier lifestyle. So you see a lot of sports-related tools or services that are growing. You see companies like L'Oreal providing makeup, even they are doing well. Companies that are selling sort of personal treats or even online course and training, people investing in themselves to become a better person. Well, again, you see a big rise in that category as well. So and the last one maybe here to highlight, disconnecting from reality, anything linked to entertainment, gaming, gambling. People want to get away from the very hectic environment out there, and companies that are in that domain are of course still growing. So interesting to see the difference split. If we analyze companies, and this is an exercise you can do as well with your own team or the people that you work with on your strategy, it's not just looking at different companies from a brand name and quick offering, but if in a low touch economy where you see different categories, so different characteristics of companies that are doing better. So you need to look at the audience. So some people are working with, let's say, with elderly people traditionally. That's a high risk group at the moment. So you need to adapt and move away from that target group. It might be very difficult to engage with them in a personal way. Some companies are linked to offline solutions only. So the location, how to interact with people, you might not be able to switch to virtual solutions. Maybe sometimes your impact on the bottom here on the supply chain level. Many supply chains are disrupted globally, are under pressure. So basically this is sort of a checklist where you can evaluate the low touch potential of an organization. In this deck already we included a couple of examples, and there's more of those examples that you can download as a reference point. So if you look at one of the winners or companies are doing well, a company like Peloton offering in-home gym equipment via digital courses and classes, that's of course a company that's perfectly designed for this low-touch era. Of course, you do fitness and guidance at home. It's actually targeted at a very high-end part of the market, so luxury consumers. The bike itself is almost serviced more than $2,000. You get a subscription service per month for up to $50, $60. But during even the pandemic, they realized that there's a whole other market segment that they can address. So also, even those companies that are doing well are also adapting their offering, moving to new kind of services, moving to free services via Apple TV or offering solutions without renting the bike itself. So you see those companies they're in great position. They cover a lot of those checklists, and still they're innovating in that space. I want to highlight this example as well, because it's not the most obvious example that you might look at. This is one of the many startups or companies that are offering meat alternatives, so vegan solutions, plant-based solutions for meat. The reason why those companies are also quite successful or growing today is mainly linked to disruption that are happening in the supply chain. So it's sort of a ripple effect in society. Many of the meat factories or meat plants are under pressure. There are a lot of outbreaks in terms of the pandemic in those facilities. So in certain regions, there are difficulties to provide enough meat to customers. So if you offer an alternative to meat, you see companies that are active in the space are actually able to grow. And again, the same company is still experimenting, trying to find new pricing solutions, trying to find new ways to access markets. So it's not just about e-commerce itself or the most obvious solutions. You also see companies that are maybe further down in the value chain that see positive returns now due to the ripple effects in our society. As a recommendation here, we advise to use a quick checklist like this to evaluate your readiness for the low-touch economy, to see on all those elements, how are we doing today? Are we all aligned in our own team? If you need to evaluate your strategy, and it's a good starting point for discussion to go forward to maybe adapt your strategy at some point. So again, a quick question to you, and you can reply in the chat. Have you adapted your strategy already? So depending on the context or region, some people didn't change their strategy so far, others made significant shifts. So did you change your strategy? And if you changed your strategy, some companies are launching new products and services, looking for external growth. Other companies are focusing their strategy on defending what they have today, defending the core business, defending the products they already have, and maybe doubling down on that. So you also see a split. I'm curious to see, like if you can reply in chat, what are you doing at the moment? Are you changing your strategy, yes or no? And if you're changing your strategy, are you defending or investing in new growth areas by launching new products and services and maybe looking for new markets out there? So it really depends on the industry. You see a big split here in how we're doing. So I see a couple of examples here in chat. So some indeed are saying we're defending, some are switching 100% from face-to-face to virtual facilitation. Some indeed are launching new products. So we see a very big split. So it's not a one common strategy. In one of our recent surveys that we did, if you look at the left side here, those are relatively small organizations compared to the large companies on the right side. And then the biggest shift here is that you see that the largest companies out there are mainly shifting their strategy to protect the core business, so to defend what they have. While if you look at smaller organizations, many of them are impacted sooner or they have a limited offering, so they need to change and find a new direction. So you see that smaller companies are moving to more to shifting to adjacent spaces by trying new products, by trying new services. So you see a different mindset in terms of innovation efforts. So depending on the company that we work with, we might focus on improving the core business today, while a relatively small company, there might be an opportunity now to find new growth areas outside of the core business and try new products, new services, new business models. So it's not a one-off solution. It really depends on the context. Very quickly, this model in terms of how companies are evolving. We started pre-pandemic, we started with the top right corner, where like you interacted with your customers in a high-touch way, depending on the industry, but you close personal physical interactions with customers or employees, and you were able to provide high value, like on value for high value. Of course, the pandemic forced everyone or many organizations in the bottom left corner, where you only had low-touch interactions, and unfortunately, in the first few weeks, low-touch value as well, or low value for the customer. So many companies shifted in the first few weeks and months to have a quick fix. So, okay, it was not enough to have to get back at pre-pandemic levels, to get back at the same value proposition, where companies are moving up again. Unfortunately, in many regions, there are still restrictions in place. There's a certain area where you can't interact in the same way as you did before. So there will be certain restrictions in place in terms of number of people that you can interact with, or how you can interact with individual people, or certain people you can't even access at all. So there's a sort of upper limit on the interaction model, how you can interact with people. So you see a lot of those improvised solutions where companies are trying to restart, but you just feel like this is not an optimal solution. People don't feel safe in that context. It's often very inconvenient way. So companies are trying to adapt, and it might be a temporary solution, but it's not a full recovery. And you see the same thing in event spaces or in festivals, entertainment business. Companies are moving to online solutions to create virtual festivals, virtual events. but most of the time it's not the same. So it's just a temporary thing, but many realize it's not profitable, it's not good enough. And unfortunately in this space, they really need to change to a very new type of business model, because this might not be possible in the next, like a full recovery in the next 2-3 years. So getting back up that high level here with this restriction in place might be really hard, but some are doing even better than before. And then there are, in certain restaurant businesses or certain areas, you see that companies, due to the pandemic, they were forced to a hybrid solution of providing customers in an offline context, still with tables and extra terraces outside, but at the same time now fully adopting digital solutions with creating in the backend virtual kitchens, cloud kitchens, so all sorts of experiments, accessing new type of markets as well. And some companies will stay in that new hybrid mode, where instead of only offering an offline restaurant experience, they will keep on providing this mixed solution with cloud services and virtual kitchens and remote deliveries and so on. So it depends on the context, but some companies are here. Other companies are moving completely to this low touch version now. So they learn something new, they learn they can offer virtual solutions, digital solutions, and they might just abandon the old way of working and stick to this low touch version of this business. You see that companies that are providing tools to help out, like tools to go direct to consumers by getting payments directly from fans, from members. So you see also tools that are designed for that solution to build new relationship with customers remotely. Those platforms are thriving. Like OnlyFans is one of the bigger stars at the moment. It started as a service. Like if you would be a yoga instructor online, yoga instructor, you could use a platform where people would pay you a certain fee so you can give private yoga classes. But one of the biggest rises, the biggest boost now is growing from adult entertainment. So it's you don't see a lot of talk about that. So it's officially, you see it as more like a way to connect with yoga stars and so on. But in the backend, many people are using it for other type of purposes as well. Other platforms like Patreon, Substack, Memberful are less focused on adult entertainment, but just it's the same type of solution, building relationships directly to customers via digital channels. And those platforms are, of course, rising today. As a last topic here, I quickly want to highlight a couple of those things. So one, if you're in a tough position and you need to find new white spaces, new opportunities, where do you start? We always advise to look at 6 different areas. So looking at changes in shifts in the industry overall, shifts in regulation, shifts in consumer behavior, societal shifts, and so on. In this specific situation, though, this specific crisis, we see that the biggest opportunities now are happening in terms of industry shifts. So meaning there are new entrants entering new markets. You see companies that are creating new partnerships. Companies need to rethink what their industry is all about. So there's a lot of stuff happening in different industries. And there's a lot of shifts happening in consumer behavior, where people are adopting a new lifestyle. People are getting used to new habits. That, of course, creates new opportunities or potential new problems that could be solved by our company. Also, depending on the region or context, changes in regulation is quite prominent. So if you look at the insurance business or life sciences area, on a very short time frame, a lot of regulations or policies were updated to allow reimbursement of certain fees, or to change to remote work and to still be compliant in a certain context. So there are a lot of opportunities in that space. We put the category new technology at on the low end, because this pandemic here, it didn't suddenly create a lot of new technologies. It's because there was a pandemic, suddenly there are a lot of new patents out there or a lot of new tools. But you see now gradually in the space of technology, new startups are trying new solutions. So technology will be enabler for growth, but it was not the reason why you will see a lot of new growth opportunities out there. So in each of those areas, we already defined multiple solutions or multiple opportunities as a source of inspiration to see, okay, what can happen in that space. We have more of those examples for each of those areas in the different reports. You can just download those reports on lowtoucheconomy.com and just use it within your own organization as a source of inspiration. I just want to, as a closing note here, I want to discuss briefly 3 different opportunity areas that I believe that in the next few months and then in the year ahead can be really valuable to multiple organizations. So if you want more material, you of course can look at the report, but those are 3 highlights that I want to briefly discuss. Overall, and this is not just purely linked to the pandemic itself, but this is one of the ripple effects. Trust in institutions and organizations and even businesses is at historic low levels. You see that happening all over the place. Like many consumers are looking at fake news even. There are a lot of conspiracy theories thriving today. So there are just a lot of indications that trust in society and institutions is so low. But as an organization or as a company, it also creates opportunities. You can tap into that need. You can create new services that offer transparency, or you can offer more transparency in your supply chain. Like we're talking a lot about companies about improving their sustainability design and being involved in the circular economy. So that means you need to you want to create more transparency in your production process and how your factories work, how you engage your employees. But this, of course, is in line with tackling that trust issue that exists in society. Also, in terms of creating new services that are linked to reliability or risk control, like insurances, those tools or those services are actually designed or optimal for this new era. Trust is quite low, so if you have any type of solution that can tap into this, you're in a great position maybe for growth next year. A second big topic it's a little bit related to the trust issue. You just see like overall the society for many people is getting too complex. Like the pandemic is even on top, but it creates tension in their work-life environment. They're reading so much negative news about also the impact of climate change, and this continuous feed of negative news that's happening, and it impacts people's lives on so many different elements. So the world's getting very complex for many people. So you see rising tensions, the rise of nationalism in many regions. Again, the spreading of fake news and conspiracy theories. It's all linked to the same core issue of the world is getting too complex for many people. But of course, again, that's an opportunity for you as an organization. If you can tap into this, you can create solutions that offer more simplicity or more convenience, that helps them offloading stress, even if it's just a solution to maybe help them make certain decisions or to help them to escape from it all. So like I talked about entertainment and gaming and those things. So when you knowing that for many people the world is too complex, you can counter that by offering solutions to maybe mitigate part of those negative effects. Again, that's an area where, depending on the organization, you can find growth in those spaces. And a last example here, and it depends a little bit on the type of products and services that you have, but there's been a tremendous push or tremendous growth area in terms of digital solutions. For me, the most interesting corner here is anything that happens to, or it happens with the older generations. And for me, it's not 80-year-olds. You see people, let's say people above 50, many of them were, of course, already digitally connected. They were using smartphones already, but most of them only with very limited use cases. They might browse for information. Many of them never actually used e-commerce solutions. And in the last few months, in many regions, those older generations have now tried online banking. They tried online shopping. They created a lot of new accounts and video conferencing tools. So many of those people became far more literate in the use of digital solutions, and they build trust that it actually works and it creates convenience for them. That creates a great solution now. That creates great opportunity, because many companies wouldn't design custom solutions that would offer a digital service to older generations, because most pre-pandemic, often that market was way too small or a niche service. But today, you know that those people are now connected, they are more familiar with those services, and they're open to try new things as well. So depending on the platform or the services that you have, it's worth now looking at old generations as well to access them via digital channels, which traditionally you wouldn't do, or you would felt like it's a little bit too niche and it's not exciting enough, or has not enough potential. So that's a third example, and depending on the company, there are some elements for growth in that area as well. Of course, if you start looking at all the ripple effects and all the different industries, you will find numerous examples. There are dozens of those cases popping up, or different trends and white spaces emerging. These are just a couple of examples of things that are happening. in the Q&A, we can quickly discuss maybe more specific industries or more other general trends. So of course, I'm available for other questions. I'll make sure you get all the slides. So this is just a quick teaser of information. We try to do regular reports. If you want to connect, you feel free to reach out on LinkedIn as well, and keep an eye on the different blog posts and stories and webinars that we do about specific industries as well. So that was just a quick summary. You can ask some questions in chat, or we can also debate this here in person. So thanks already.
Thank you so much, Nick. I know we asked you to slow down, but there was so much information in such a short space of time. I'm sure people are still digesting. There's a great deal of condensed information in your presentation. And I always just find every time I see the material, I kind of take more away and I think of other things. So what I'd like to ask people to do is to please put your questions in the chat for us. There are a couple of things people are asking, some very specific things about specific industries. There was a question from, I think, Samson, who asked about the future of commercial property, if you had any thoughts on where you thought commercial property might go, given this kind of, change.
Yeah, that's an interesting area, because you see there's it links to sometimes links to safety issues, like certain areas people are not willing to go back, like malls and retail places or cinemas, and all the complexities that are linked to that. So people might avoid that. And the commercial services that are in there might not feel comfortable to restart their business, knowing that there's not enough foot traffic. And probably the biggest shift, anything that links to working from home and the impact there. For us, we rather look at this on a city level. So there are regions in like San Francisco or New York, or where many people, the prices were already really high, or like Amsterdam region, where the prices were really high, and you already see that the first big organizations are starting to move away, canceling leases, restarting, reconsidering their options to. I think there will be, in those big commercial places, unfortunately, I think there will be a very negative impact. But I wouldn't overstate it like this is a global trend in every different region. It's, for me, it links more to those tech hubs or areas where there are a lot of people are able to work remote. Just, I think for many people, they are, like I also said, like many people cannot rely on remote work and digital connections. So there's a lot of debate, like this is now the future of work, and everybody will switch to video and even AR and VR. But many of us are living in this bubble, like me as well. We're living in this bubble. I'm at home. I have all this set up to do video conferencing, and this is my reality. But most people out there are working in other environments, and they will not move away. They will go back to factories. They will go back to their regular retail jobs, and now all that property will remain at similar, will be used in a very similar way. So you will see the stories also. I think it's a little bit over. I think the impact is a little bit, people overestimate the impact here, because also journalists are in that position. They're living in this bubble. They can work remotely. They will overestimate the impact on society, that many people will start working from home, and also the property will need to be resold or can't be used anymore. But I think it will be limited to certain regions or certain cities. It's not a global trend, I believe.
Sure, Nick. And I guess also what we're seeing in South Africa is quite a big swing. People with cash are buying up property at the moment. There's been a slight spike in the property market. So perhaps the bigger players are thinking ahead, to your point, and taking advantage of the kind of economy so they can buy up more property. It's going to be an interesting space once the dust is settled, let's say. Another question here from Petri asks about the petrochemical industry. Quite interesting, the future of transport, perhaps, in heavy industry.
Here the impact is often less linked to the pandemic itself, but more to the tensions that are created in terms of ripple effects due to nationalism, geopolitics, and how basically the different banks are also almost gambling or trying new solutions to provide cash and liquidity in the market. So you see I see less the impact on the pandemic itself. You see that in terms of, let's say, the transport business and logistics is actually growing quite well. Like the people are still transporting a lot of goods, and in terms of private logistics as well. Transport, if you look at regions in China, personal travel and car usage is up even more up at the same level or even more. You see traffic congestions And it's back because people flock back to their cars. They're avoiding public transport. People see their car as a safe personal bubble to travel in. So many parts that are defined to like links to like fuel and anything in that space might be actually back at relative high levels. Doesn't mean like a full recovery, but it's not, it will not be impacted as severely as due to the pandemic itself, as severely as many people will see. There are many parts of our economy that are using those services or products that are actually growing rather quick, based probably mostly based on what we see already in China. But it depends a little bit more about geopolitics and national tensions, and it might create unusual ripple effects that are less linked to the pandemic. But overall in society, different regions, there's so much tension in the market that it might take a quick turn as well. But I don't think linked to the pandemic, but more to geopolitics in that case.
Yeah, perhaps also the rise in online commerce, that's got to be delivered. The logistics are still huge, and so there's a great demand there as well. So Lawrence asks an interesting question. Says that Lawrence is in risk management and delivering services on behalf of insurance companies. And says that you mentioned that was one of the growth areas. He's asking how he could perhaps modify or enhance his company value proposition to match the new normal.
Anything linked to insurance and risk management, that's for me an interesting area, because I assume, and our team assume, there's so many growth options there, because like I said, people feel there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. So when people are uncertain, or also companies, there's so much uncertainty, then you see that people are flocking more to insurances or new type of insurance products. Any service that helps to mitigate risk is actually a good solution today. People are typically buying more of those things. Another element here, which I think it's an interesting, almost a negotiation position or that can create leverage. Insurers and players in that same field, everybody involved in risk management, they hold the key to restart the economy and society. Because if they're not willing to cover the risk, let's say in tourism, if you're opening up hotels and all services and regions, but nobody's willing to cover that insurance, then it can't be restarted, because people know. An extreme example here, but the Emirates Airlines now recently they announced a new COVID insurance product, and it will cover your funeral when you travel with them, and you might unfortunately get sick and die in unfortunate event. They cover your funeral, so it's a specifically designed COVID service. Also, you have cost linked to being in a quarantine position, but this of course linked closely to the pandemic. But there are many new services that are, I would say, again, if people are working remotely, and you get sick at home and anything happens in your private environment but you're still actually at work. So many insurance and risk management products need to be redesigned to accommodate for this low touch environment. So governments and insurers and everybody involved in space holds the key to actually open up the economy. So that's interesting to see how who's taking the risk here, who's taking forward, and then the governments will probably help out. That it's not only the responsibility of those companies. So it's an interesting combination here, how they will collaborate.
Okay. John, I wanted to bring you in just quickly, because I noticed early on well, about halfway through the presentation, Nick mentioned some stuff about the rise of inequality. And I know, John, that you've spoken a lot and written a lot about the shocking Gini coefficient in South Africa. I wanted to ask if you could maybe both share some thoughts on that's a very real problem for South Africa, particularly. It's an immediate problem. John, your thoughts on how the Gini coefficient may be affected the wrong way after this?
Well, it could be disastrous, because we have the worst Gini coefficient in the world, meaning we've got more money trapped in the fewest hands and least money trapped in the most. So we're having the people who are suffering are the people at the poor end mainly, because they're not getting their jobs, they're not getting their pay, they're getting some subsidies, they're getting food subsidies, but their permanent employment prospects are challenged as well. Now, I'm not a catastrophizer at all. I tend to not to get much pleasure out of describing those things. I instinctively force myself to think, what are the solutions? And so I think the solutions here are that we've got to start changing. I mean, Nick's point on risk is massively important. You know, what the government does to support that. Helping people with their subsidies is massively important. But in the longer term, we've got to get education and skills to people, because it's skills that give freedom, not wealth. You know, so we have to push out internet connectivity across the country. We've got to invest in that. We've got to breach the digital divide. We've got to get education to people. That's not going to solve it in the next 6 months, but actually within 2 years it will. We can skill up people within a year and to get the infrastructure in. And then we've got to do a lot of work in terms of changing the way we think of South Africa. This is a long haul we're into now. So companies have got to change the way they think about their capitalistic models in terms of just profiteering and Milton Friedman, stakeholder capitalism. We've now got to think about how do we, or shareholder capitalism, we've got to think about how do we help develop those parts of the economy that are just untouched. But that is where our future lies. So one good thing from this is it's getting people to understand that we are all connected in such a way. And I think Nick's presentation is enormously helpful to force us to think about the consequences and to just stare reality in the face and start making plans.
Thanks. Yeah, I thought it'd be good just to bring you in because you're more familiar with the South African context than maybe Nick's had a chance to. I know you've got quite a lot of research on South Africa, Nick, but I know John's been involved. Junaid is asking a quite an interesting question. He's talking about the fact in your low touch, low value move, low touch, low value. He just wants to know more about low touch, high value, as an opportunity. And he just wants to expand, if you could expand a little on that.
What was the last sentence on it? The low touch?
Just to dive into low touch and high value.
Yeah, yes. So low touch and high value. So this is basically, so that's the corner where most of the time it's an acceleration of digital solutions, but you see that companies that were never used to offer work services remotely, they had not the services in-house. So one of the trends or consequence things that I assume there will be more products designed to like professional tools, but then designed to be used at home. So it's not just about video conferencing. You can see, let's say, certain lab setups for people who are working in medical areas. Normally, they have all this very advanced equipment that is locked in a lab or a medical facility remotely. But you see that people, and also news anchors, and many people, they rely on very professional equipment. They need more equipment than a laptop. And they just took a lot of that stuff at home or to a remote location to work remotely. And you see that those products and services linked to that were never designed for that use case. So, and also services, I mean, say cybersecurity services to make sure that data is being protected, even if you're working from remote somewhere. So you see there's, if you move in that corner for, okay, it's low touch interaction, so maybe a limited amount of people or from a distance, but you don't have the right professional gear to do that. It's more than a webcam and a couple of lights. Then you need new type of services that can accommodate for that new reality. So I expect in the year ahead, there will be more products that are designed for that. It could be as basic as products that are more easier to carry, or they can put in your car, or that multiple people can connect remotely. Also, the cybersecurity layer is being covered. Maybe an insurance product is linked to that. If you use it remotely, it's being covered if something breaks down, whatever. So you see, companies are, in the first day, they were everybody improvising. People just took a lot of stuff from factories and companies to do that. And now companies are like, okay, for the next year, 2 years, we might allow more remote work, but then you need better tools at home. You might even invest in your home solution or local co-working space. You can work with more professional gear. So it's not just about digital solutions online, because a lot of stuff is happening there. For me, it's also the providing offline solutions with hardware products and tools that are designed for that use case, not just digital webcams and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, because I see Samson has asked about the FANG grouping of companies. And we all know that, they've been kind of perfecting low touch and high value for quite some time. So they're very geared towards that. Whereas people who are just getting started now don't realize it's about layers. There are layers of this kind of development. It's not about going digital. I don't know what that means anymore, actually. What does going digital mean? It doesn't mean getting a ring light and a high-speed connection, to your point. So there's been massive investment over a long time by the people at the who are acquiring most of the value, because they've been doing low touch at lower cost and then delivering high value. Amazon is a good example, maybe not so much Apple, because they are very, very high price, but it's interesting. So I think, Junaid, you've got to look at how you invest in low touch first. I think that's very important. Yeah, John, maybe you could speak a bit about how you've done that with Henley.
Yes, I mean, I'll briefly talk about Henley. We were quite aware anyway, and luckily, I suppose we are quite conscious of what's going on around us, and we look for people like you, Nick, who will tell us what's going on. So we're quite stretchy in terms of getting out to people. So we learned about this early in February, and we managed to prepare and get ourselves online quickly. But a lot of that was about good situational awareness and not running away from fear. Nobody really wanted, none of us wanted to believe this was going to happen, and none of us really want to believe that it's going to be quite difficult over the next year or two. So I believe in facing reality and making reality your friend. So we were able to convert, get completely online. We're setting up new businesses, but it's a huge learning process for us. We don't feel clever in having done that. We'll feel just stretched, and we're pushing ourselves. It's hard, and there's lots of emotion and challenge in people doing that. So for me, I think what preoccupies me, and particularly in terms of South Africa, is that obviously we're suffering in our economy, and we're going to be feeling that over the next year or two. It may or may not strengthen the government, but what do we as business schools and what do we as companies do? It's no good being fatalistic and nihilistic. We've got to make changes. So I think the models you're sharing are extremely useful to help us think. How would you, Nick, how would you get to a board or a group of leaders? How would you approach them and get them to shift, to see these realities in a way that you think are appropriate? How would you get to them?
Often, the larger the company, often the more assurance that things will work. So the more innovative or experimental you want to do, they want to get at least some proof that things could work out. That's typical how it goes in any type of innovation project. Luckily, in this situation, everybody around the globe is experimenting at the same time. So that creates, if you want to try something new, you can look, okay, what's happening already in this space now in Israel, or what they're doing in Vietnam or in Asia, or so there are certain regions that are a little bit ahead of the curve. So meaning that companies in the business in that environment have already experimented and tried so many things. So if you want to try something new, most of the time you'll find similar companies or adjacent companies that are starting to do similar experiments. And by showing those examples, how other companies have failed already, what they've tried, what worked, it helps to get people on board in a large organization. Because still today, and I totally get it, people are risk averse. There's so much uncertainty. So they want extra proof that things could work out. That's probably also a reason why you see that typically the larger companies are not willing to take tremendous risks now to launch new products or to try new business models, even if they are under enormous pressure. They want to protect what they have, defend, and maybe wait it out a little bit. The good thing is there are so many experiments ongoing that you can look what works to see what patterns are emerging, and then maybe copy some of those elements to your own space. So that's something what we try to do in terms of analogy thinking, to show other patterns in other industries. It creates a little bit more reassurance and more confidence for companies that actually to move forward and to try new things. So that's a little bit the positive thing, that at least you have more examples out there. If you do a traditional innovation project, it might sometimes be very difficult to find other experiments out there to give that extra reassurance to companies to go forward.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so Nick, I think we're coming to the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you. You mentioned earlier up front there was an audacious vision for a board of innovation, which is to try and assist. I think it was 100 million people, was it? Within your time frame. So that's an incredible vision, because you are speaking about collaboration. You're speaking about helping and spreading something perhaps virally, because at scale it's got to move really quickly. That's a very interesting idea. How do people become involved in what it is that you're trying to do in spreading this innovation? How do people contribute energy towards this kind of mission?
Yeah, what we try to do, and that's continuously, we try to create tools, frameworks, all sorts of material that we make freely available on our website. So of course we have our purely commercial activities where we collaborate with large multinationals on innovation projects, but all the things that we do, the material that we create, many of those things, we just document that online and we give that to people away for free. And now we see that people are using our tools and knowledge in different environments. Sometimes they collaborate together with us, maybe to redesign a tool or framework that we can give feedback. But we create a starting point, we create a new material, new context, and we give it away for free so people use it. And that's something we do now for more than 10 years. And we just see, like, if we, over the lifetime of Board of Innovation, we assume that we'll not quit next year. We assume we aim to reach 100 million people with all that material and tools to help people out. And for me, although our commercial offering is a little bit more focused on multinationals and large organizations, we even see that people in a very different environment, like we get people in Venezuela, just as an example, where there are in society there's so much pressure and people need to organize themselves. So how do we collaborate together just to get our society back up and running? And then again, they use our tools and frameworks to create a common vision, to find a strategy, to create collaborations there. So it's not linked in any way in terms of commercial in a commercial project, but of course it gives us a lot of positive feedback that we can help out even in those very tough environments where people can use our knowledge and tools to organize themselves. So that's the reason why we keep doing those things, just to share what we see, and it seems to help other people out there. So it's nice to see.
Cool. So I think that's a brilliant place to bring it to a close. We're just talking about the fact that sharing seems to be one of the fastest ways to spread innovation, as opposed to competing or as opposed to doing it for yourself, self-service. It just seems to hinder progress. And at a time when we need lots of innovation very quickly, it's interesting that when instinctively you want to close your hand, what you should be doing is opening it to raise the tide. So Nick, thank you so much. We have a couple of requests for your presentation on the chat. I think a lot of people loved it. They just need a bit of time to digest the information. I know certainly we've spent some time digesting a lot of what you're putting out, because it's been really useful to us working through the COVID and beneficial. So thank you so much. John, thank you for joining us. Thank you very much. And of course, Professor Jonas, thank you for joining us. And thanks for arranging the series. I think it's a really good way to spend an hour. Crisp, powerful, lots of takeaway information. And of course, the recording and the presentation will be available so you can get the maximum benefit. Just a couple of quick notes. The first one is the next webinar will be hosted by SABSA and Gibbs, the ABSA Group Chief Executive Engineering Services, and Dr. Morris Ntombeni will host. So that should be good. That's on the 9th of September, 9 to 10 a.m. You can register on any of the SABSA online platforms. Please tell other people. That would be amazing. Very good. And then, of course, at the end of this webinar, an evaluation form will pop up. If you fill that in, there's a good chance these will get better in the way that you like them. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone. And I hope this has been useful. And then I'm aware of the fact that it's 12:30. Many people are on a schedule. So thank you all for joining us. And until next time, keep safe. Thank you, everyone.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.